Thanks for joining me. It's time for a little TLC on the old KTM 550. So it's gotten to a point, it's gotten a few years age on it. There's a few things I need to fix. One of the worst things about having two bikes is that as long as you have one bike going, you kind of neglect the other one. And so my KTM 300, some of you watched the video last ride, I think something's goofy in the transmission. I have not looked at it. It's a good excuse to get the old 550 burning again. And so we'll go ahead in the course of this video. I'll walk you through some of the things that I need to get done with it, and hopefully we'll get her going again. Let me start by telling you a little bit about this 1995 KTM 550. Sure, some of you have seen the video, know this bike very well. I bet there's going to be a group of you that have maybe even never heard of this bike before. So I'll give you a little bit of background for what I can remember off the top of my head is that KTM had some of their 500 big bore two-strokes. I believe 91 was the first year of the 540. It was a DXC. It was kind of a weird looking bike. They had the radiator cooling shroud, radiator fins was kind of built into the tank. I actually had one right before this bike. They call it a 540. It's the same engine as this bike. I believe they're 548 cc's. And so that 540 was a 91 and 92 model. 93 was the very first year of the 550. Once again, similar engine. That 93 was more closer in appearance to the 91 and the 92 than it actually was this bike. And then in 94, 95, 96 was the year of this model here. Little swoopier bodywork. Chassis, in my opinion, was way better. Like I said, I had that 91. It was a little archaic feeling. This one felt quite a bit more modern. The 94 and the 95, those bikes were actually white. White, you say? That's black in front of you. When I bought this bike, it was already black, and I've come to like the look of the black quite a bit. And so this bike will probably be black for as long as I own it. So once again, 94 and 95 were white. 96 was actually orange. That was kind of the first year where KTM went to orange on a lot of their different models, but the plastic and everything else was the same, just was a different color. So as far as this bike itself, I think the original owner of this bike was Larry Coleman, who was a motorcycle hill climber out of Laurel, Montana, a good hill climber at that. The person I bought it from a guy by the name of Chuck Hogan. He was also doing some motorcycle hill climbing at the time. When I bought it from him, I bought it in the fall of 2000, I believe. And so at that time, he was more interested in snowmobile hill climbing. I think he was also doing some like off-road pickup type racing, but was getting out of the motorcycle hill climb game. So I picked this bike up at the time. It has a whole other tote that had hill climb extensions, some extra wheels, things like that. I even thought I was a hill climber there for a while, but haven't even had the extension on this bike for quite a bit. So once again, I bought this bike in 2000, so I've had this bike now for 24 years. When I bought my 91 KTM 540 back in 99, I guess it was, I started an arms race with a good friend of mine, Bill Felton, who was riding an XR200 at that time. And shortly after that, he picked up, I can't remember, it's either 95 or 96 Honda CR500. He still rides his CR500 to this day. So both of us been riding these big bore bikes for, going on 25 years now. So let's take a real quick look at what this TLC is and what I'm going to be working on today. Last time I rode this bike, it just quit on me. We were riding along and just nothing, no spark. Of course, went through plug, this, that, everything, check stuff from the stator, whatever the case may be. I had that sort of thing happen once. When it happened to me before, I actually lost the ignition on it. And so these bikes, I think it was like a 2-3 year only deal. It was the SEM Ignition, and they were not known to be a super reliable piece. And so I'm pretty sure that's what's going on here. So that's going to be the big thing, is putting in the new ignition. So I have a kit from PVL. So they actually make one for this bike. And so you can see there's a stator, rotor, coil. Ignition is part of the coil there. So that needs to go on there. Next to that, you can see that's a intake boot off of the Boyson rad valve. I'll show you what it looks like right now. It has been siliconed a lot. You kind of hopefully see it in there. You know, when you have a leak on the backside, sure, it lets a little air in and things like that, maybe a little dirt. When you have a leak on the front, it's not a good deal at all. Of course, you have your air start bypassing your carburetor. Not good. So that one's about as siliconed up as you can get. And so got that new boot there. You know, I think it's time. There's a good view from this side. I think it's time for a new clutch. So if you look at the KTM 550 clutches, I don't even know if you can get them anymore from the factory. They are super, super expensive. So what this clutch kit here is, this is the fibers for a KX 500. And I'll have to look again. I got it off the internet. If you can get the right stack height, they will work. The fibers for the KX 500 are a little thicker. So I have the information on what combination of steels to use and how many of the fibers, and it should be in good shape. I bought a while back, I bought some clutch springs. Those are supposed to be the stiffer, better ones. So while I'm in there, I might as well put those in. What do we have here? So we have a oil seal, and so this one, I think it's shot because I will lose level in my transmission, and it'll put out some nice smoke, and it'll get to a certain point and I'll be out of oil in the transmission there. So I'm pretty sure it's sucking it and burning it. And then that handy dandy bolt right there. So what that bolt is, and I just realized I don't have everything I need. That bolt is, where is, oh, it's right in front of me. That nice fun bolt right there. Why is that one important? Well, this swing arm, you can see right here, there's supposed to be two of these, and there's supposed to be a chain guide that goes on there. Over the years, I have had this chain jump off the sprockets here and there, even though the chain's good, and it's been tight enough. It just needs a chain guide. The reason that does not have it on there is because when this bike was being used to hill climb, they would put the extensions, you know, would go there, and then they cut off one of those because at that point, I don't think it would clear the tire, because it does put the tire that much further back. So they cut that inner mount off, and then they had a bar, a piece of like strap iron that would go further back, and you'd mount the chain guide there. So I do have another swing arm up in Billings, and I do need to replace it, and that'll give me the chance to get my chain guide back. And when I do replace swing arms, I think I'll just go ahead and install the extensions on this one and just leave it. And that way, if I get the wild hair to go hill climbing again, it will all be there. So if there's anything that I'm not real worried about today, it is probably this bolt, because I don't have a real purpose in mind of why I need to have it without that swing arm. Oh, one more fun thing. I have a leaky petcock. It's been that way for a while. I did have a rebuild kit that I used, another petcock off what was it, PW80 I think it was. We'll see if some of the O-rings that were in that kit will fit this. See if I can get that fixed from slurping and leaking as well. So that's what we got going on, and so we're just gonna jump right into it, and I'll give you some video updates as we go along. Here's a little better view after things are stripped down. It seems like with these bikes, you just go ahead and do it. Once again, I've done enough over the years that it doesn't take that long to pull off the shrouds and tank and side panels and stuff on it, and really that gives you the best sort of access to it. So you see there's that factory ignition right up there that needs to come out. Figure out where we're going to mount our new components. Give you a little better look at what we got as far as that intake boot. Yeah, it's nasty as can be. This whole thing needs a pretty good scrubbing probably. That's the cover, of course, we're gonna have to get into for our ignition right there. It looks like probably need to pull the pipe to get in there, and who knows, maybe even pull this skid plate that we have on here. And so probably wouldn't hurt. That skid plate's pretty nasty underneath there. Give you a chance to get it cleaned off a little bit. So making progress. We're going to start with the stuff that we really need to get done in order to ride it. The clutch wasn't slipping yet, so that's a nice to have at this point. The ignition and this intake boot definitely are things that have to be done today. So intake boot's really simple. This is that rad valve right there. It's just a piece of rubber basically that goes on there that does a connection between the rad valve and then goes to the carburetor. So it's basically as simple as sliding that rubber piece off, putting the new rubber piece back on, put my car back in, tighten the clamps back up, voila, magic, we're done as far as the fuel side of what I need to do is done. So we'll just take care of that real quick, and then we'll just dig right into our ignition system. Those are the two things that really have to 100% be done before we take this thing for a ride next. This is what it looks like underneath that, what I'm going to call the magneto cover. So this is that SEM, I'm going to call it ignition, flywheel, whatever you want to call it. I see something like a dot. It makes me wonder if that's supposed to be top dead center. I'm having heck seeing it actually from up top here. There's not a lot of room between the top of the head and the frame. I'm gonna have to figure out at some point how to get exactly top dead center so I can measure down TDC so I can accept my new ignition. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and poke a screwdriver or something in there, rotate around, try to get as close as possible top dead center. See where my mark is down here, because like I said, usually when you see something like that, it usually is indication of top dead center or something to help things out. So let's try putting that screwdriver in, rotating around, and see what we find out. I rotated around and put that screwdriver up there in the plug hole, use the flywheel, turn it by hand, and this is what I'm seeing, I believe, as top dead center. So we look at that mark, and I would have put top dead center straight up. I'm looking to see if there's any other sort of mark here that it corresponds to. Not really seeing much. It looks like it kind of points right toward that stud, basically, where it goes in there, that boss. I think what I'm going to do though, because we're not going to be using this anymore, there's going to be a new piece that goes in, and so I'm going to go ahead and take a marker, and I'm going to mark on that, basically on that stud right there. It would be the end of the crank is what it is. I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to mark straight up on that. So that gives me at least an idea where top dead center actually is at. We're going to have to, fine tune it more than that before we do final install, but at least gets me in the ballpark. We kind of ran into a snag here. Finally got the nut off. It's opposite rotation of a normal one, so got that figured out pretty soon. So it's righty loosey instead of righty tighty, but we got that off. I don't have the right flywheel puller for this, I quickly realized. So what you need is a flywheel puller that it'll thread into this flywheel, and then there's a piece that's threaded through the center of that, and so you thread it in here on these threads for the flywheel, and then you turn that center piece. It's a crankshaft, then I'll pull your flywheel, and I do not have one. I think it's a M26 by 1.5. I think I found one on Dennis Kirk. I ordered it. It's on the way. Should be here toward the end of next week, and hopefully that's the right piece, and we'll try that when we get it, and we'll go from there. So have to hit pause on this project here for a second. The puller came in. I took a look at KTM World so I could see the microfiche, and this is a 26 millimeter by 1.5 puller. According to what shows on KTM World microfiche, I think that's the right size, and so I'm going to give it a shot. Pretty straightforward, but it's a two-piece puller. So there's this piece here, and it threads into the flywheel. See if I can do this on camera. Definitely way tougher than you would think. So that threads in there. Tighten that up a little bit, and then this piece threads in the center. And the idea is, of course, that as we tighten this outside piece up, this middle piece, it'll push against the crank. This piece is threaded into the flywheel, so it'll force the whole assembly out. So go ahead and get my flywheel pulled now. Can you guys believe that this piece is a 16 millimeter? There's a lot of sets don't even have a 16, just kind of a weird size. Luckily I do have a 16 impact, so should be able to just buzz this thing off. Let's see. Just like butter. So even though we had to wait a week or so to get the puller, we now have the flywheel off, and now we can take our next steps on getting our new ignition on. Hallelujah! This is what it looks like with that flywheel off. So you can see the stator in there. So we'll just continue with our next steps, removing those screws, and of course undoing this wiring and taking it back all the way up to the coil. And I'll have to jerk my plastic, of course, back off the bike so I can go ahead and put the new coil and CDI on it. Got a few different screwdrivers. Look at this crazy beast. This is like the long-handled stubby. So, you know, when you typically think of a stubby, I think of a short blade and a short handle. But this is this truly a stubby? What do you call this thing? So, it actually, I don't think it's too good for too many things, but this is just the tool for this job. So, long-handled stubby, here we come. Old stator, flywheel, ignition coil, CDI, all gone at this point. So, we're ready to start going ahead with our new components. So it looks slightly different what the old one was. One of the biggest challenges I think we're going to face is that we're going to have to get in the right position at a certain distance before top dead center. I don't know how the hell we're going to be able to measure that, to be honest with you. This engine's big. It sits right below the frame. I'm not sure how to even get a dial indicator all that good. We'll play with it and see what'll work there. Maybe I can get something. We'll try that first. If we can't get that to work, I'll figure out the distance in degrees. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 10 degrees or 12 degrees or something before top dead center. Worst case scenario, like I said, I'll go ahead and figure top dead center. I'll put a level or something on it, so I'm straight up and down, and make a mark, and then rotate that mark until it measures, using an app probably on my phone, measure 10 degrees off of that. And you know, that's one way to do it, but dial indicator would be preferred. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We're not quite there yet. Now we're down to the bare bones of it. There was one additional plate that I wasn't paying attention that was on there that needed to come off. When I test fit the rotor, it's just a taper fit, and it didn't really want to fit all that well, and it took me a bit to figure it out. So now I'm just test fitting it, and then I got to figure out how to set my base timing. Have I ever told all of you how much I really love aftermarket stuff? So I mean, it looks like it'll go, the rotor seems like it'll fit on that taper good enough. Stator plate fits on, looks like it lines up well with the holes, perfect. So I have these 3 little like machine screws that are supposed to be used to go ahead and screw that rotor down. And would you believe that they are not the right size bolt? They are too small. They actually will fit right inside those holes. They're there in the case. So those are the old ones that came out, so I can figure out the thread pitch there and the size. I can use those for length because that appears like it's right. But I am once again in a spot where I cannot go any further. So I guess it's time to run to town. Not going to happen tonight, but time to run to town and grab some bolts and see how many trips to town it's going to take before I get this project done. So hopefully not too many, but I guess baby steps, one step at a time. My wife got me the right bolts, the right length, the right thread pitch, so I was able to get that stator bolted on. I think it's pretty close to where it needs to be. You can see that right here, this one's centered up in this groove, and these are definitely not centered in the grooves, but they both have a little bit of movement. I haven't put any Loctite on them yet. Part of the thought is that I have to go through my timing operation, get my rotor in the right spot. If I have to fine tune, move the stator, I'll go ahead and do that. And then when I'm finally done, then I'll put blue Loctite on, as you know, on a 1 bolt by 1 bolt basis, and then just be done with it. So next order operation is try to figure out where to mount my coil and CDI. So this is a universal type kit The original one mounted there. We can see those holes. This isn't going to fit there. So I got to looking at these different, I think they're both grounding tabs that are here on the frame. I'm trying to do what minimum work I can. I don't really want to start doing a bunch of welding. The idea is to try to find a spot where everything's going to fit. And on these big bore bikes, they don't have a lot of extra room. By the time you get tank and things on them, heck, it's hard on this bike even to get a spark plug out without pulling the tank. In fact, I usually always pull the tank to do that, which just seems crazy. So there are some mounting holes on that bracket, and so I'm just looking at all these different combinations. Where can I mount it so that my tank will still go on? Where will things be at a point I can still access terminals, spark plug wires, all that sort of good stuff. So I think I kind of found something. There are these two grounding tabs. This is the one that everything was connected to, but I think I have enough room to potentially move wires over here, or like in this case, if I have to extend a wire, you know, so be it, I'll do that. But I might be able to just move it down here as well. So here's a spot I think I might be able to use. It's just kind of sitting precariously right now. Is I think I have it set up against this tab right there, one of those grounding tabs. If you look from the top, it's centered underneath the frame, so I don't think the tank is going to hit it. As you can see, I don't have a hole in my mounting bracket at that point. I don't have a hole in my tab at that point. So I'm going to take a marker. I'm going to mark a hole in this bracket. And then once I drill that hole, and I'll use that hole to figure out where it needs to go in the tab. And then I'll have one good mount. Does it need to mount other places? You know, probably. But what I might do, everybody plug their ears, I might just use a zip tie in that front hole, maybe these other two holes, and mount it one spot with a bolt, make sure it's grounded good, zip tie it to the other two. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, to be honest with all of you. So that's what I'm looking at right now. So I'll go ahead and get my holes marked and drilled. I've been working to try to get a setup to get my timing set up here. Look at this Rube Goldberg machine that I have going on there. Ideally, you want to have a dial indicator basically to measure your piston. I'll go around and show it here pretty soon. So they do make fixtures that go in your spark plug hole and that your dialing indicator goes into, and I don't have one. And so as you can see too, there's not a lot of room between the frame here and the head, and so you want to be as square as possible. Am I 100% square? Nope, I'm not. Do I think it's going to matter a ton? Nope, I don't think that's going to happen either. So got in there as square as I could, have full travel, my dial indicator, of course without hitting the steel frame, you know, with this piece here. And so in order to do so, I mean, this is a pretty crazy setup for my dial indicator base. Luckily or unluckily, I don't know, this bike has a steel frame, so if I have the bike or the base kind of sticking there and the arm kind of going there, then I have it set up for my dial indicator. So I spent quite a bit of time trying to get repeatable results. So with any measuring system, you know, that's the most important. So I went ahead and kicked it through, got my top dead center, went ahead and zeroed it out at that point. And then I think it said for my measurement before top dead center was 85 to 93 thousandths before top dead center. And so once I had it zeroed at top, then I went ahead and rotated it the backwards direction until I split the difference at 89 thousandths. So that's what I'm at there on my gauge. So now that I'm at that spot, oh, and one thing I did too, just for sanity check, is I went ahead and drew a line. It was at top dead center. I was pretty sure I did a calc too as far as that distance. I thought it was going to be about 10 degrees before top dead center. I just wanted a visual, make sure I wasn't going crazy. So my visual lines up. That does look about like 10 degrees. So on my stator here, you see I have a couple lines depending on what rotation your engine goes. So there's clockwise rotation, there's a line that goes along with it. So now I can plop my rotor in the position to line up with those lines, and then I should be able to lock that rotor down. If I have to do any fine tune, I can move the stator and rotate it a little bit, and then I should be in business. Okay, so I got everything set with the dial indicator. I went ahead and set my rotor on as close as I could to be lined up with the line. Cycle it through one more time with the dial indicator to see where we sat, and I don't know if we can see it here. Try to get the right look. It's not quite lined up. It off just a little bit. So now what we'll do is there's those Phillips machine screws. Is we'll go ahead and loosen them. Should be enough movement in the stator that I can get that lined up perfectly, and then that should be our final part of getting this timing lined up. When I loosen these screws to go ahead and reset the stator, at this time I'll go ahead and put the blue Loctite on them so we can call them good at this point. So as soon as we get that done, we'll go ahead and get our box mounted, our CDI coil mounted up top like we were talking about, and get a few wires connected, and I think we'll be ready to try to fire this thing up. Got the 550 back here in Billings, got it stripped down again, plastic, tank off, all that sort of good stuff. I had tried starting it down in Miles City, and one thing that was interesting is that maybe this thing grew a bunch more compression, maybe I can't kick worth the crap, but for whatever reason, I haven't struggled getting it to kick all the way through. So I don't know if I have too much advance in the ignition, making it almost want to kick back. It wasn't kicking back on me. I don't know what's going on. I'm pretty sure it went through nice and easy when the plug was out. So I'm going to jerk the plug, make sure it cycles through nice. And then I'm going to take my handy dandy ignition tester here and going to go ahead and connect that and see if I'm getting any spark with this new ignition. They said, I don't know how many times in this instruction manual for this PVL Ignition, that make sure that there is a ground at all times. Like we're all used to taking a spark plug and hanging it off the side and grounding it and checking for spark. You know, they said loss of a ground could cause ignition to fail, which I'm not super excited about, to be honest with you. But since I have this ignition tester, I'll go ahead and try it out. And then the other big thing is that my petcock was leaking like a sieve. So I think I have some stuff. Maybe I can try to fix it, check to see if I got spark, try to get some fuel in it, and see if I can get this thing started. Okay, spark plug's out. I mean, it kicks over nice. You can hear, of course, this thing being a 550, it does have gobs of compression. So there's nothing mechanical here affecting it kicking over, which I was pretty sure was the case. Doesn't hurt to check. So go ahead and put my plug back in it, hook my ignition tester up, and by God, I hope we have some spark. I'm about ready to push everything I own off a cliff. I went ahead and hooked up the ignition tester, started kicking this thing over, and I got it to spark like twice out of like 20 kicks. So I don't know what the hell is going on right now. I think the next mode of operation here is that they keep stressing the importance of all the different grounds. So I'm going to get out my multimeter and I'm just going to start checking, because I do have some things like connection from here over to this head stay. They said to connect it right to the engine. You know, this is aluminum, this is aluminum. Theoretically, there should be continuity there. So I'm just going to verify it from, you know, the base over to the spark plug and all those sort of things. In the manual, they gave some figures on what some different resistances should be between some different terminals and stuff. So start checking some things out, see if there's anything easy, but not super impressed right this second. But let's see if I made an error here somewhere. And just to make sure I'm not absolutely 100% crazy, I did go ahead and change the plug out too, just to make sure that I could rule out a plug being the issue. All right, got out the multimeter. This one here has a pretty handy setting for continuity, that if you test something that has continuity, like I'm touching the two leads, it should beep. Why is it not beeping there? That's a problem already. That must not be tight. Let me get that tightened up, because that would be a problem already. Take two on continuity testing. All right, now it works. So this, of course, we're just proving that our meter works. So this wire should be grounded through this screw because this screw goes all the way through. There's a connection. That should be continuity, which means that wire should be continuity. This should be grounded as well to this plate, to the head, to the spark plug. So that shows that I think my grounds are good. So I think we're gonna have to dig in deeper and look. They have some settings for the different coils and things like that. So I guess that's where we're going next. You know, I think I'm at a spot I'm gonna have to get a hold of them and see what's going on. It's really weird. From what little bit I can check, I think, you know, things are fine. Stator at least checks out fine. The other stuff can't check as much. When I go ahead and check my grounds, I get good grounds everywhere they say you should have good grounds, and just really inconsistent spark. I mean, it seems like it sparks about once every 10-ish times, and it's totally random when it does. So I'm really confused at this point, and I don't even know what else I could do. One thing I did do was shot in the dark. I took this side cover off. I thought maybe that rotor was a little bit dirty or something. Had some tape around it for spacing for mock-up type purposes. So I went ahead and cleaned it off good. Make sure there's no residue. It feels nice now, but it doesn't seem to matter. At this point, even if my timing was off, it should still show spark. And for it not to show any spark at all, that's really concerning, because as we all know, for an engine to run, it needs fuel, compression, and spark. And you can tell from kicking on it, it gobs the compression. Fuel side doesn't in the equation right now because we're still trying to just figure out if we can get spark or not. So consider me confused, and I can do a little more research and try to figure out what the heck's going on here. I really couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting consistent spark out of this thing, or a lot of times no spark at all. And so, you know, like a lot of these things, it just had to walk away from it. Although I probably walked away from it for several months, largely because my project stuff is in a different spot than where I live, but I just couldn't quite come up with what was going on here. And all I could think of is that I wasn't getting the necessary clearance between that flywheel and the stator. Just had to be it. And so when the instructions, you get this thing, that flywheel comes with a 2-piece tape on it, which is supposed to be around 10 thousandths thickness. And then you go ahead and you put your stator plate in there loose, and then you put your flywheel with the tape on it, and that's supposed to give your necessary clearance. And then you mount everything down, and then you take the flywheel off, you take the tape off, and voila, it's supposed to be good. It had mentioned that basically what I'm going to call that stator plate, the metal on metal part, you know, that should be the only place you have to adjust. And where the stator actually mounts to that stator plate, those Torx type screws, you really shouldn't have to do anything there. And so that's what I did. I followed the instructions to a T. But once again, I got back to it just has to be a clearance problem. So what I did this last time I was dinking around with it, I loosened everything up. I loosened up the stator plate. I loosened up where that stator mounts to that plate. I went ahead then and I applied 2 wraps of painter's tape on that flywheel. Put the flywheel back in there, snugged it just a little bit, and then I went ahead and snugged everything down and thought that might be a better way. If there's any movement at all, that might be the way to get my clearance. So at this point, I wasn't terrible worried about what my timing was or anything like that. I'm just trying to get the basics of, is this thing going to actually give me any spark or not? Because this ignition system, you know, it's a decent amount of money for this bike, and it has to work. I kept doing some research on the internet and things about PVL ignitions, and it seemed like there was good feedback, so I just had to give it a shot and try to make this thing work. So that's what I did the last time I was here. Reset that like I just said, and now I'll show you what the end result is. Alright, so it might be a little hard to see, but here's my ignition tester. Once again, this ignition system, I don't know what I think about that, but it says you shouldn't actually ever take your plug out if you ever have a situation you don't have a really good ground, that you could risk, burning the ignition up, which doesn't sound great to me, but I guess it's what it is. So this is, of course, the handy dandy Harbor Freight Spark-O-Matic 5500. And so we got our wired in line there. And so I'm going to kick this thing over a few times and show you what I found. So we got spark. It looks like we have spark now every time we put our foot down and kick on it. So I'm pretty excited about that. I mean, that was what we were really missing here. And without spark, there's just no reason to go any further. So we're here in December now. Of course, I won't have any ride until sometime this spring. And I got other stuff I really need to get done with this bike. So next steps will be is I'm gonna go ahead, of course, and I'll put my dial indicator back in here. I'll get my base timing set. Other stuff that I have to do this bike. The fuel petcock is leaking like real bad on it, and it's probably just that rubber gasket that goes inside it. But that petcock, it was either you have fuel or you don't. And so I think I can still get a on-off reserve petcock. So I'll put that in it, so that should solve my fuel problems. And then I was gonna go ahead, I think I have a crank seal that's leaking some oil on the transmission side. So I got some seals to replace. I think while I'm in there, I'm gonna go ahead and put a new clutch in it. So I got some other things to do before this thing is really ready to roll. Going into 2025, but we have spark. So that's gonna be the end of this video. And we'll probably do another follow-up one come spring where we got this thing out on the prowl again. Thanks for watching.